She didn't look like someone who trained in the shadows, who bled through nights where the ocean swallowed screams, or someone whose name haunted classified reports that junior officers weren't clear to read. She just looked like another sailor, quiet, small, always sitting alone in the mess hall with her sleeves rolled down and her hair tied tight, like someone taught not to shine or stand out. Her name was Keira Hale, and when she arrived at the covert training base deep in the Pacific, no label on the map, no address, just coordinates. No one cared. To them, she was just a sailor assigned to admin rotation, maybe logistics, maybe random reinforcement. She never corrected them. She never introduced herself. She never needed to. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous people in the room were never the ones talking. The mess hall was loud that day, louder than usual because a batch of new male recruits had arrived. Loud, cocky, desperate to be seen as tough. Their egos bounced off steel walls that smelled like salt, sweat, and disinfectant. They talked like they already earned a trident, like they already survived drown-proofing, like they hadn't broken down crying during hypothermia drills the night before. Keira sat at the end of a bench, eating rice and chicken slowly, methodical like someone trained to stay ready even while doing something as simple as chewing. She didn't react when the loudest of them, a broad-shouldered guy named Mason Harper, the kind of man who measured worth in volume and strength, dropped his tray beside her and laughed loudly with his group. She didn't even look up. That annoyed him, because someone not reacting meant someone didn't fear him. And Mason needed fear. It fed whatever insecurity lived inside him. He slammed his elbow into her plate, spilling half her food onto the table. The hall went quieter, not silent, but aware. Keira simply wiped a grain of rice from her thumb and kept eating like nothing happened. That made Mason furious. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he growled, leaning into her space. She still didn't react. Instead, she took another bite. His face shifted, annoyance turning to humiliation. People were watching, and men like Mason couldn't stand losing an audience. So he shoved her shoulder hard. Her spoon fell. She still didn't look up. He thought she was weak. He thought she was scared. He thought she was nothing. So he slapped her, open hand, loud, echoing across steel and tension. The room froze. Forts paused midair. Even the ventilation hum felt quieter. Kira's head shifted only slightly from the impact, hair barely moving. Her cheek reddened, but her eyes stayed calm. Too calm. No anger. No shock. Just cold calculation. The kind that meant something inside her had switched. Something dark. Something trained. Mason smirked because he thought he won, until the man sitting 3 tables away stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. Chief Instructor Dalton Hayes, a decorated Navy SEAL with more classified missions than visible scars, stormed forward. His voice was a low command, the kind that could drop a room into obedience. "Ale." She finally lifted her gaze, not toward Mason, but toward Hayes. "Stand down," he ordered. She nodded once. Just once. No emotion. No hositastion. Hayes glared at Mason, voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Mason puffed his chest. "She's just a Navy. She is not just anything," Hayes snapped. The hall held its breath. Whispers started. Mason scoffed. "What? She's your secretary or something." Hayes stared at him like staring at a ticking bomb. "She's tier 0. The room reacted before Mason did. Several recruits flinched. One dropped his drink. Someone cursed under their breath. Tier 0 wasn't a rank. It was a myth, a rumor. A whisper passed in classified facilities and emergency briefings. Tier 0 meant Black Ops asset. No record. No public service file. Operatives used for missions when even SEAL Team 6 couldn't be acknowledged. Mason laughed, but it sounded shaky. "No way. Her." Keira finally stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just controlled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She didn't blink. She simply said, "Permission to engage, Chief." The recruits blinked. Permission to engage? Hayes didn't answer immediately. He looked at Mason, then at the room, then back at Keira. Something in his jaw tightened, a silent yes. Keira didn't wait. Her body moved in a blur, faster than Mason could register, faster than anyone expected. 1 second she was standing still, The next, her palm slammed into his sternum with surgical precision. He stumbled back, air exploding from his lungs, eyes wide with confusion and pain. Before he recovered, she stepped in, elbow strike to his jaw, foot sweep to destabilize, knee strike to his ribs. The entire sequence took 4 seconds. Mason hit the floor gasping, not understanding how someone so small, so quiet, had dismantled him like a machine executing a pre-programmed sequence. Keira stood over him, not towering, just present, calm, cold, unshaken. "You never strike someone you haven't measured," she said quietly, voice low and razor steady. "And you never assume the quiet one is weak." Mason tried getting up. Bad choice. In one smooth motion, Keira pinned him with a wrist lock, so efficient even Hayes looked impressed. Mason screamed. She didn't tighten the hold. She maintained it at the exact pressure point where panic replaced pride. The recruits watched in stunned silence. This wasn't a fight. This was anatomy being weaponized. "Apologize," Hayes growled at Mason. Mason coughed, eyes wide with fear now, not of pain, but of realization. I'm sorry," he choked out. Keira released him instantly, as if he no longer existed. No victory pose. No esmirk. No ego. She simply retrieved her spoon, sat back down, and continued eating her meal like nothing happened. But everything had changed, and the base would never look at her the same again. The base changed after that day, not because people feared Keira, but because they suddenly realized there were levels to strength. Loud strength, desperate strength, and the kind she carried. Silent, controlled, earned through pain most would never survive. Mason avoided her, but something in him shifted. Not humiliation, but curiosity, almost respect, though he would rather die than admit it. The recruits whispered about her. Some fear, some awe, some fascination. But Keira remained the same, quiet, distant, always watching exits, always sitting with her back to the wall, always aware of things normal sailors never noticed. When she wasn't in the mess hall, she trained alone, night dives with no oxygen backup, live-fire drills in darkness, forced apnea until her hands shook and vision blurred. She wasn't training to impress. She was training to forget. But memories weren't kind. They always returned, especially at night, especially when the ocean was still. A name haunted her more than scars or missions ever did. Liam Cross. A fellow operative. More than that, someone who saw her when she still laughed, when she wasn't just a weapon. He died on a mission she survived. And every breath she took since felt like dead. That night, after everything in the mess hall, Chief Hayes pulled her into his office. He didn't yell. He didn't congratulate her. He just studied her like someone reading a classified file hidden inside a human body. "You lost control," he said calmly. "No, sir," she replied. "I executed minimum level response." Hayes almost smiled, almost. "You haven't slept in 3 days." She didn't respond. "You think pain keeps you sharp," he continued. "But it only makes ghosts louder." She stiffened just slightly. He noticed. "You're not here to prove something," Hayes said quietly. "You're here because command thinks you might break." She looked up then, eyes sharp but not angry, hurt. "Sir," she said, "I don't break." Hayes nodded slowly. "Everyone breaks. The difference is whether you rebuild or stay shattered." She wanted to walk out, but protocol rooted her feet. "We're deploying," Hayes said after a long silence. "Offshore target, high-value asset extraction. Your point lead." She blinked once, the only sign of surprise. "Alone?" "No," he said. "With the recruits." Kira's jaw tightened, not in frustration, but in acceptance. Leading recruits meant responsibility, and responsibility meant remembering deaths, hers or theirs. But she nodded anyway. Orders were orders. Word spread fast, and recruits buzzed with adrenaline and panic. They had never been deployed with someone like her. Not a rumor, not a trainer. Someone who had lived the kind of missions most only heard in classified debriefs. The briefing room felt heavy when she entered, every pair of eyes tracking her like prey or prophecy. Mason sat among them, posture straighter now, not arrogant, just attentive. Keira didn't raise her voice. She spoke like someone who knew clarity saved lives, not volume. We go dark insertion at 0200. No radios unless compromised. Two primary objectives: breach, extract, exfil. No heroics. No hosetastion. You follow my signal, not your ego. Her gaze landed briefly on Mason. Not hostile, not mocking, just aware. He held her stare and nodded. Not a challenge. Agreement. The journey to the target was a silent symphony of movement. Boats slicing through black water, moonlight low, ocean calm but heavy with tension. Keira led them through the surf. Her body moving like water remembered her. The recruits followed, stumbling at first, then steadier under her cadence. At the shoreline, she halted, raised two fingers, and listened. Most heard nothing. She heard everything: boots, breathing, distance, angles. They moved. The compound wasn't large: steel walls, guards, floodlights sweeping like predators. Keira timed the lights, counted heartbeats, and signaled. The team split, flanking paths, synchronized movement. The first guard never saw her. Her arm wrapped around his throat, cutting blood, not air, dropping him silently. Another recruit hesitated on his takedown, heart racing, breath loud. Keira reached him, steadied his grip, whispered, "Control the fear. Don't let it control you." He nodded and continued, changed. The extraction point was deeper inside. A room with reinforced walls, alarms wired into pulse sensors. Keira knelt, studying the circuit. She didn't rush. Patience was her weapon. One wrong cut, and the compound would light up like hell waking. Finally, click. The lock disengaged. Inside, the hostage, a battered intelligence officer, stared up, confused and scared. "You tier 0?" he whispered. She ignored the question. "Move." They were almost clear when everything fell apart. Not because of a mistake, but because Warren never cared about precision. A guard returned early, spotted a recruit, and the silence shattered with gunfire. Floodlights snapped alive. Sirens roared. The night became chaos. "Move," Keira ordered, her voice cutting through panic. Bullets ripped through air. Mason covered a recruit, returning fire with fierce accuracy. The team pushed toward the extraction zone, but the enemy outnumbered them. Waves of gunmen closing from every angle. Hayes' voice cut through comms. "Hale status?" "Compromised." "Engaging." She didn't retreat. She advanced, because sometimes the only way out was through. Her body moved like memory. No fear, no hesitation, just mathematics of impact and trajectory. She dropped enemies with terrifying precision, but more poured in. A bullet grazed her shoulder. She ignored it. Another tore through her side. She paused only long enough to stop the bleeding with pressure and grit. The recruits watched her fight, not like a soldier, but like someone with nothing left to lose. They finally reached the extraction point, a cliff where boats waited below, but enemy forces closed fast. Mason saw them flanking. Without thinking, he shoved Keira out of the bullet path and fired back. The shot meant for her hit him instead, clean through the ribs. He fell hard. She caught him before he hit the ground fully. His breath was already wet, lungs filling with blood. "Why did you push me?" she asked, voice softer than war allowed. He grinned weakly. "Because someone needed to." She pressed her hand over the wound, but she knew. He knew. Some injuries didn't wait for medics. Gunfire closed in. The recruits hesitated, torn between retreat and trying to save them. Keira yelled, voice cutting like steel, "Get to the boats." "That's an order." They moved, but Mason clutched her wrist, eyes dimming. "You're not broken," he whispered. "Just human." She swallowed hard, something she hadn't felt in years burning inside her chest. When his hand finally fell, her expression didn't change, but everything inside her did. She stood slowly, pain forgotten, humanity buried. And then she fought, not to win, not to survive, but because grief demanded violence. By the time reinforcements arrived, the ground was littered with bodies, herself standing in the middle, bleeding, silent, unshakable. Hayes approached slowly. "Hale," he said softly, "stand down." She didn't respond. Not right away. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were empty. Completely. She walked past Hayes without a word, stepped into the extraction boat, and stared at the ocean the whole ride back, watching waves break like memories she wished she could forget. Back at the base, the recruits stood in silent respect. Nobody whispered now. Nobody questioned now. Mason's empty bunk became a reminder of cost, of sacrifice, of the line between strength and suffering. Keira didn't return to the mess hall. She ate alone, trained alone, existed alone. Because loss had carved her again, and she knew something everyone else still feared to understand. War didn't make heroes. It made survivors, and survivors carried ghosts.